Thank you again. This is our weekly press conference. I brought a couple guests with me today. Our Republican leader in the Oversight Committee, Jim Jordan, who also serves on Judiciary as well, and soon to be one of our newest members and additions to the Republican Conference, who just won in North Carolina, Dan Bishop, for all you congressmen-elect. Press doesn't applaud for you, Dan, so get used to it.
I knew.
First, I want to thank Baltimore for having us back. We've had our conference here, as you know, many times before, and we thank the city for having that. Today and the next couple days, we'll be discussing different policies, looking at from the 21st century, going all the way from continuing our economics, from the strength within rebuilding our military, but also our domestic issues when it comes to privacy, when it comes to the environment. We'll be doing breakout sessions with a number of members getting together to work on the policies as we move forward. This week was a very interesting week when it came to Washington. I think it's a clear sign, or actually foretelling, of what's going to happen for the next 18 months. Let me just walk you through this week. This week we watched two special elections in North Carolina, both of them won by a Republican. Some of you, I know, write something much different, but you ought to analyze this race. In 2018, this race was won by less than 900 votes, and there was questions about whether votes were harvested or not, so they had a new election. Democrats were able to hold the exact same candidate that they had before, was able to campaign for 17 months. From a financial point of view, that candidate had all the odds and advantages towards them. We had to come from behind. We had Dan Bishop, who's been representing the area in the State House, come from behind. Not only did he win, he improved by more than 400%. The president made a considerable difference in this race coming in when you watch the turnout and you watch the movement in numbers just a week away to what they ended up on Election Day. You watched counties in which the Democrat nominee the last time actually carried but lost this time. We improved by 2 percentage points. If you simply add 2 percentage points across, that's 13 more seats with only 6 more to go to win a majority. The difference between being in the minority and the majority is roughly 116,000 votes overall. So I think it's really foretelling of what's happening. Then let's look at what's happening inside Congress themselves. We got a speaker who had a press conference today that refuses to answer questions of what's happening to her chairman and judicial committee because they don't know exactly what's happening. You got a majority leader who I was once last term. The responsibility is to manage the committees. Fundamentally has a different definition of what's happening in Judiciary Committee than the chairman themselves. I've told you many times before. Chairman Nadler, if he was a chairman on our side of the aisle, the way he handles his committee, we would have removed him from that committee long ago. His inability to run a simple committee, his inability to know and explain what is moving forward. Chairman Nadler, when he campaigned to become chairman, and I'll quote what he said he would be the strongest member to lead an impeachment right after the election. Even though the facts don't play that way, Chairman Nadler continues to try to move that way. We watched a new poll that came out through Democrat voters. Democrat voters know more about the Democrats' investigation than anything legislative they passed. I challenge the country to name me one thing this new Democrat majority has solved. Name me one problem that they've been able to solve. They have an internal battle, which pretty much becomes an internal war. At first, we watched it was just a few new freshmen fighting with the speaker and the ideology of the party itself, and we pretty much found that they won out. Now we find their own committee chairs they cannot manage of what's going on, nor do they know what's happening, nor do the members of the committee itself know. This is what the future holds, and that is why today, the next day, and the others will be mapping out a fundamental agenda to show the American public a better path and a better way forward, that we could actually show the ability to continue to grow. When we watch today this economy, the strongest economy we've had in more than 50 years. I'll give you a few statistics. In the last 13 months, hourly wage has gone up at least 3% or higher. For those who are really trying to make sure we raise their wages, we're being able to accomplish that. We're showing a path to do that, not with a mandate from government, but actually an economy that grows. You look at women between the age of 25 and 54, The participation rate in the economy is 76.3%, the highest participation rate we have found in more than 15 years. You see now, we've now joined by our dear friend Doug Collins, the Republican leader when it comes to the Judiciary Committee. So first, let me turn to Jim Jordan, our leader when it comes to the Oversight Committee and a member of Judiciary Committee as well. Jim?
Well, thank you, Kevin. Let me thank Kevin for his leadership and Doug as well on the committee. And then, of course, congratulate Dan. It was a big night. And Kevin is right. What a contrast between Greg Murphy and Dan Bishop on Tuesday evening, and what you saw. And I'll let Doug jump in here too, but what you saw in Judiciary Committee this week. I mean, 2 days ago, the Judiciary Committee votes to take away American Second Amendment rights without them doing anything wrong, and they voted to allow that to happen in a court proceeding where the person who's losing their rights doesn't even get to show up and defend themselves. And then 2 days later, less than 24 hours later, we had the crazy scenario we had today where is it impeachment, is it not impeachment, is it an investigation, is it an inquiry? Jerry Nadler says he doesn't care and doesn't want to talk about that anymore. He just wants to go after the president. And we all know that's straightforward. And the reason they want to do this, I said this in committee today, the reason they want to change the rules in the middle of the game, 9 months into a new Congress, the reason they want to change the rules is nothing else has worked for them. Michael Cohen hearing was a flop for him. Came and lied 7 times under oath. The John Dean hearing was a flop for him. And you all watched, and the whole country watched, the Bob Mueller hearing. We all know that was a flop. So they got to come up with some way to go after this president, because they're bound and determined to do it, even though the country knows it's not warranted, even though they know we shouldn't do it, even though the country in every single poll says don't do it. They're bound and determined to do that, so they change the rules in the middle of the game. And understand the underlying issue here. The president was falsely accused of conspiring with a foreign state to influence the election. Jim Comey investigated for 10 months. After 10 months, he found nothing. You know why we know he found nothing? Because we deposed Mr. Comey, and he told us that in the deposition. But he still leaks information to get a special counsel. Bob Mueller's appointed for 22 months. He investigates, and what's he come back and say? No coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the election. 32 months, putting the country through this. And what do Democrats want to do? Change the rules so they can keep investigating and go after the president. It's ridiculous, it is wrong, and everyone in the country deep down understands that. Unfortunately, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee doesn't. What we should do is look at how the false accusations started. And the good news is, and thank the good Lord for this, Bill Barr is doing exactly that. But we could help on the committee. The ranking member understands this isn't pushing for this. Why don't we have the Inspector General, who, oh, by the way, just issued a scathing report of Mr. Comey just 2 weeks ago. But 2 days ago, when I asked Mr. Nadler when we might expect an opportunity to question the Inspector General of the Justice Department, the guy who heads the Inspector General's Association in our government, Mr. Horowitz, when we might expect an opportunity to question him and ask him about his report, Jerry Nadler says, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Stop and think about that. This is the chair of the Judiciary Committee, with its storied history in the House of Representatives of defending basic rules, basic procedure, and basic constitutional rights. And that's the response we get from him. So the minority leader is exactly right when he says, what a contrast between what Democrats have done this week and what we saw on election night with the big wins in North Carolina. And so I appreciate the leadership of the leader. And again, congratulate Dan, and I'll welcome to the podium the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Collins.
Well, it's been one of them days again on Judiciary Committee. It's been one great week, though. Congratulations. When you look at saw it coming, we know what's happening here. This is one of the things that we're seeing for those of us who travel the country, and those of us on stage did this for the last month, is once you got outside of Washington, D.C., it was not amazingly gloom and doom. Eeyore only lives in Washington, D.C. Everywhere else, there seems to be optimism. There's jobs. There's these kind of things happening, and people are excited about that. But let me touch base really on what happened this morning, which was a sad continuance of what has happened for the last 8 months since they had the ability to have the majority. We have continued down. Now today, if anybody could follow the pretzel logic of the committee this morning, especially the chairman, on saying, well, we're investigating, we've been investigating, is it an inquiry, it's not an inquiry. Let me make it very clear to you, and I know many of you have already written articles today, let me go back and say, if you say that any of this is new rules today, that's just wrong. Plain and simple, it's not new rules. These are rules that have been part of the committee structure forever. They're simply choosing to use them now, and they're packaging them together to make it seem like it's something more. This is important. Because when most people across the country only get their news by either a quick line, a quick headline, or a quick momentary look at the screen, they're not going to look past, and the Democrats know this, they know that they're not going to look past impeachment and everybody's going to think something's going. The reality is they're pulling a sham. I talked about it this morning. This is nothing more than a filter on a social media site, Instagram, Snapchat, whichever one you want to use. It's a filter to say, I look better than what I am. The problem is they don't look better. When you pull away the core of Chairman Nadler and the rest of his committee, there is nothing there. It's the biggest empty suit you want to have, and they won't admit that basically they have nothing to go on. In fact, if you don't believe me, let's just look at a history lesson. In June, Chairman Nadler and many of his cohorts said when the Robert Mueller report has definite impeachable offenses in it. Robert Mueller testifies in July. And then in August, my chairman sends out a letter to other committees saying, hey, you guys got anything to impeach on? Because we don't have anything anymore. So now when you have Jamie Raskin from Maryland actually coming up and saying, you know, Mueller was just a small part of what we're investigating. How many of you, in with a straight face in the press corps, y'all do great work, how many of you believe that they really thought Mueller was a small part of what they do? It was not. So today as we go forward, here's where we're at. They're wanting to have this idea that they can have it both ways, that they want to pacify those on our committee and their base, because I feel sorry for Chairman Nadler in this respect. He took the mantle of what they didn't know that they couldn't do, and that was impeachment. He took the mantle and said, we're going to go after Donald Trump because we hate Donald Trump, and now we have the majority, and we've got all this stuff that's going to help us impeach him. And now, after 8 months, going on 9, he has nothing except smoke and mirrors, a dog and pony show. In fact, the dog and ponies left, and now we got nothing but a show. And that's what happened today. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. As I mentioned earlier, there were 2 special elections. The one everybody was watching was North Carolina 9. Those constituents had not been represented since we were seated. Dan Bishop got in the race a little later. The Democrats had the exact same opponent, financially had an advantage over us. At the end of the day of this Tuesday, improved by more than 2 percentage points. I want you to remind of one thing. We have fewer seats to gain to get to the majority than the Democrats had 2 years ago. There are 31 Democrats who sit in seats that President Trump carried, 13 of them by more than 6 points. If there's one thing I would be concerned about, if I was a Democrat, the management of the floor today. Tell me, how is a Democrat going to go back and ask for a re-election on what they achieved? All they achieved are investigations that have gone nowhere. They found out that there were lies. They watched a party move where Speaker Pelosi at one time was furthest to the left, and now she's considered a moderate in her own new Socialist Democratic Party. She has the title, but no longer the power of how to manage a floor. She has committee chairmen. She can't even understand what they're doing in committee, especially when it comes to Chairman Nadler. The majority leader doesn't even know what the committee is doing in his own press conference the week before, or a few days before. But one thing we do know, Democrats spent millions of dollars in the belief that they could win an election. When you watched who turned out in this election, it just weren't Republicans voting for Dan Bishop. There were a lot of Democrats who did not like what they saw inside Congress and gave a vote to Dan Bishop. That's how it was a 2% higher, a 400% increase in the turnout of the final election vote to the new member for Congressman-elect Dan Bishop of North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Leader.
It's tough. Nobody applies for you.
Yeah, that's. I can get used to that. I'm not at all surprised. We have press in North Carolina as well. I'm delighted to be here, and it's interesting to hear the content of your report, because the contrast that I offered voters in North Carolina 9 is exactly the contrast that's being described by these members of Congress today. You had, on the one hand, a vision of America with a booming economy and more jobs and border security and lower taxes and continuation of American exceptionalism. And on the other hand, what I heard more than anything else from voters as I passed through the district, and we have a lot of Democrats in our district, and I heard it from a lot of Democrats, is that what the Socialist Democratic Party is articulating not only stuns them, it frightens them. Not only on the subject of this being consumed with the idea of destroying this president, but also, which we're hearing more detail about today, but also their policy proposals, which are outlandish. And the people of the 9th District, so, and Mr. Leader, I think the point that makes clearest the situation we were in electorally, in addition to the fact that my opponent was running for 27, 28 months and was the beneficiary of $16–17 million of expenditures from the farthest left sources in America, outside the district, outside the state. We also had a period of 6 weeks where we had relatively level playing field financially in this race. And we not only caught him with the help of President Trump and Vice President Pence and great support from here, we caught him and we passed him. And we had, under those circumstances, a very clear victory. And so I'm delighted to be here to meet. I will also say, about 85% of the members of this conference financially supported our campaign. The help from here and the alignment, the various parts of the conservative movement that worked together or worked in the same direction in this campaign was a marvelous thing to behold, and the result was one that I think ought to resound across the country. Thanks very much.
All right, let's open up for some questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, Peter Summer with Capital Intel, BBN. My question is, we have both the judiciary and oversight. We have 50 states looking at antitrust investigations, Google, Facebook, big tech. Seems to be a bipartisan issue. What do you see happening in the next few months against these on antitrust issues?
You guys want to take it?
Or we see them back in Congress under
Yeah, and just in the next little bit, you're going to see even starting tomorrow, there's going to be some information requests that's going to come out. And I think this is the part that we need to look at. And what we've tried to do is, and you had mentioned bipartisan, I know from the committee and the oversight is going to be looking at this as well. From the judiciary perspective, it's time we look at this from the truest antitrust perspective and not just go to the one end saying we just need to break people up, we need to because they're big, but actually see what they're like in the marketplace. Are they suppressing ideas? Are they keeping others out of the marketplace from an antitrust perspective? And then also just how they operate in a new economy. Everything that is disruptive and big is not necessarily bad. The question is, does it become bad if they act in ways that is contrary to the market and contrary to the privacy issues that most Americans have? So I think you're going to see some more of that. The unfortunate part, and I know in the Judiciary Committee, is we are so preoccupied with taking things from American people and investigating this president that this often gets overshadowed, but we're going to see a little bit more of that in the next few days.
I would just add one aside. This may be one of the few areas where you can get some bipartisan. You saw this with the attorney generals in town earlier this week. This may be one of the areas where the Congress could actually work together. Mr. Cummings and I are working on, and our staffs, more importantly, are working on this facial recognition issue. And there was strong bipartisan support in the committee to begin to look at this issue. So I'm optimistic, but I think right now we're in that stage of getting all the facts and making sure the American people understand what's exactly going on.
This will be one of our topics in this retreat for the next 2 days, and there's a lot of concern. We want to make sure there's competition. You sit back, and it's some of the points Doug made. Just because you're big does not mean you're anti-competitive, but we want to make sure they are. Should Amazon ever been able to create, why wasn't Sears become an Amazon? They had the catalogs, they had the stores and everything else. They had the competition able to go. But I'm really concerned about privacy. What are people gathering about our own information? And I believe in the conservative philosophy of private property. So when it comes to privacy, shouldn't we all know exactly what someone's able to gain the information from us? If they monetize it, shouldn't we receive part of that information? We should also be able to move it, and we should be able to delete it. I think those are simple 3 bases of how we should deal with privacy, but these are the exact issues that we'll be discussing here within the policy, and I'm hopeful that we can find a bipartisan answer for this, because many times I find the Democrats take it just like a Dodd-Frank. Either they want to break it up or they want to make it a utility. So then you get no innovation, but then again, you also have no protection for your privacy. Yes, ma'am.
Do you guys think that impeachment can actually work towards the GOP and the president's advantage? And especially you guys, do you want to see a vote on impeachment and have Democrats?
We've already had a number of votes on the floor, and they've all failed. Nobody would want to see impeachment for a personal political gain outside of Chairman Nadler and a few of him on his committee. This is not something to play with. America is too important to play a political game like this. And I think the American public expect us to go to Congress. We've got a lot of problems to solve, and we should work on them. But the entire time, and the whole reason why Nadler ran for this position is because he said he would be the very best in impeachment. There is no reason to move forward with it. The American public does not want it. The only person that tries to continue to drive it is the chairman. Even if you talk to their own leadership, they don't know what he's doing. Again, makes the point. If you watch the way he handles a committee, from the most basic committee, if he was a chairman within the Republican conference, we would have removed him simply because his inability to how to move a committee in a proper way. Yes, sir.
Leader McCarthy, in discussions with the White House, what specifics, if any, has President Trump shared with you about what he would sign, what he would support related to gun control legislation?
There's a number of issues that he has talked about. The number one thing he wants to find is there a way we can solve that these devastating actions that take place never happen again? And you know, the president has acted before. I traveled with the president when we flew out what took place in Las Vegas. My community itself lost more lives in Las Vegas than the entire state of Nevada. And what we found was a bump stock that was approved from administration before him during the Obama administration. And this president acted. We no longer have a bump stock. We watched when the other shooting in Texas at a church, that an individual was able to have a weapon, and they never should have, simply because the NIC, the National Instant Criminal Background Check, should have picked up on it. But you know what? Our own military failed, and the way he abused his wife, he never should have got it. So we passed legislation that modernized it. So what the president is doing is gathering all the information. He had a number of us down to the White House. I know he did a call yesterday with bipartisan senators. He is gathering that information, and he told me he will come back with finding the ways to find a solution. He knows there's a problem, and he wants to solve it.
Has he given you an indication on where he stands related to background checks? He said things that are inevitable.
He wants to make sure whatever we do solves the problem. So he's gathering all the information, which you should do at the very beginning. The Attorney General was in the meeting as well, looking at ways, how do we make sure that this never happens again? How do we protect law-abiding citizens on their rights as well? And that's what he's doing, and he'll come forward with where he's going. I know there's a number of things that he's looking at. Yes, ma'am.
Give you a timeline, sir?
I think it'll be very shortly.
Leader McCarthy, with the president coming here tonight and his comments on the city of Baltimore and Congressman Cummings' district in particular, specifically calling it disgusting and a rat and rodent infested mess, were those comments appropriate? Do you think the president needs to clarify or apologize for them in any way tonight during his remarks?
Look, I think the president made a very good case here of why many major cities have challenges. If you want to take the president's comments, you can go to the former mayor of Baltimore. You can go to what Congressman Cummings had said before about his own community as well. These are challenges we want to see a change to, and this is something the president has been working on. When you look at the opportunity zones that were passed inside our tax bill, this is a clear contrast on either government trying to solve a problem for 20 years and have not do it, this war on poverty, are really transforming communities, and we're finding that's happening faster, better investment in others. So I think the president made a case. Why do we accept the challenges and ignore them? We should accept them. When I look at California, I look at the homelessness, affordability, the challenges that are happening throughout the cities, that San Francisco is now losing conventions on how they deal with it. That is a direct contrast in our policies. And I think the president coming here symbolizes, yes, he cares about Baltimore. He cares about the people who live in Baltimore, and he does not accept that you have to stay in poverty. He has found from his entire life how to bring people out of poverty, give them a better opportunity, and that's what he's doing in his job as president, and that's why he's coming to Baltimore as well.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Leader McCarthy, I'm Alana Austin with Gray TV. We represent, many viewers who are farmers, who are in agriculture-heavy communities. So we wanted to ask if Congress would be discussing any actions to help farmers who are concerned with the ongoing trade discussions with China.
I thank you for your question. I just happen to come from the #1 ag community county in the entire nation. So agriculture is important to us. We want to make sure that we have markets that we can sell in. Most importantly, we want to make sure that we have water that we can produce it. And also, we want to make sure that we have a regulatory society that we can actually grow and feed not just America, but the world, because we know that it's a safer product of going forward. When you sit and talk to the agriculture community, they know what China has done in the past. They're supportive of this president to get a good agreement. one that is fair, that keeps us for the next generation to be able to farm as well. I've watched that, I know this discussion is getting closer. I've watched that we were at a point that we could come to an agreement. It was Xi Jinping who backed away from what he had agreed to prior. The president is committed to this. I was just with the president earlier this week, with Lighthizer, with Mnuchin and the president, discussing ways that we can actually solve this problem and that the president is committed to it. And I know when I go out to the farm community, there's no one that supported farmers more than this President Trump.
Just a follow-up.
Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Two members of your caucus, Liz Cheney and Rand Paul, are fighting. They're having a pretty explosive
Well, one's a member of my caucus, one's in the Senate, yes.
pretty explosive fight on Twitter right now.
In regards to what?
Warmonger, she's insulting his approval ratings. Do you think that this speaks to split in the party that's kind of rupturing over the firing of Governor?
No, I think it's a difference of opinion when it comes to national defense. And it's simply that. People can have a discussion about policy. That's healthy. The difference is when it comes to the Democratic Party. You've got new freshman members who are now primarying the number 2, the chairman of Ways and Means, the number 4, the chairman of Appropriations, the social justice who believes they have to purify in their party because they want to become social democrats. That's a battle and that's a war, and that's a problem that the Democrats have, not one that the Republicans. The Republicans have never been more united. Don't take my word, take for the members on the stage. Actually, look at the polling itself with this president. No president, not even Ronald Reagan, had as much support within the party as President Trump has. So, no, I don't have any problem with having a debate of ideas and actually disagreeing on ideas. But at the end of the day, they understand that they agree more, that they want tomorrow better than today. Yes?
A follow-up, sir. Have any of your colleagues expressed any concern to you about the manner in which John Bolton was ousted from the White House?
I have not heard that. And the president has a right to have people who work for him that he feels gives the best information and works best together. Would you want to have somebody work for you that if you're not working well together, you're having disagreements with? There are a lot of people who sit inside that White House that will give the president different opinion than the president has. That's what he wants to gather. And he wants to gather all the information. If he couldn't work well for him, I want somebody in there that he can.
I see you're giving a speech on 2020 and beyond. Can you just give us a little bit of a preview? What, if you have a speaker's gavel at that time, what the top of your list is that you get out of it?
Well, first thing we would do is make sure our debt is taken care of. This is continuing to grow. We've got a majority that just has taken over the Democrats. The first thing they did was not pass a budget. We'd pass a budget, just as we did before, that put us on a path to balance. We'd make sure that our entitlements are protected for a future generation because it comes into question today. Every great society has collapsed when they've overextended themselves. We would hope that we would actually solve the surprise billing before it took us to win the majority. But with the Democrats, we don't know if they're able to pass anything in the process of where we go. We look to an environment in the future. I think you'll see a number of bills that we will produce. 90% of all plastic that goes to the ocean comes from 10 rivers in the world, not one of them in America. But I think the ocean goes the entire world. We have an opportunity to actually solve that problem. You'll find a number of bills that we produce going forward. We watch companies that can extract CO2 from the air. There's a concern for all of us about CO2. Why wouldn't we incentivize the ability to do it? Dan Crenshaw has a bill today. It would be out of committee, but the only problem is it has Dan Crenshaw's name on it as an author. We would not play games. We would find ways that would unite this country to put us in a path to be stronger. We would continue to build our military to make sure we're safe, not only here, but around the world as well. There are a number of items we'd go through. When we look at technology, are we prepared for the 21st century? Are we protecting our privacy rights as well? So there are a number of items that we continue to go with, and that's our discussion and our breakout sessions. All right, last question. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you can do it. He was too slow.
I'd like to ask you about the administration's plan to reform the house finance system. And some free market critics say that Fannie and Freddie can't be reformed, and it might be better to get rid of them altogether.
I think the White House and the administration, along with Patrick McHenry and Financial Services, is something that has been studied for quite some time. We watched at a time where America had to bail them out. We want to make sure they're secure, but also we want to make sure that those who need to have capital for a home have the lowest rate possible and be able to prosper and be able to build homes as they wish. This is an area that we want to look. We want to protect the taxpayers at the same time. We want the individuals to have the lowest rate to be able to go. So I think it's not something that you can ignore, but it's not something that you would say that you just can't deal with at all. There are a lot of ideas out there, and that's another issue that we'll be discussing at the retreat as well. I look forward to talking to you throughout the retreat, and I think you'll be at some of our speeches. We'll have the president speaking tonight. Some people might want to watch, I guess, the Democrat convention or debate. Not quite sure what they'll promise tonight. I know they're
Way most everything so far.
yeah. No, they're very supportive of making sure those who are here illegally to have health care outside of Americans themselves, but I think there's a lot of problems that we can solve and work closely together. And I'm excited to have the president here, especially after coming off adding 2 new Republicans that will be sworn in next week. Building on an economy, the strongest it's been in 50 years. And the unique part about this economy, it's not an economy that built for one person. It doesn't matter your gender, your color of age, the color of your skin, or your age. It is helping all. And we want to continue to build on that and make America stronger. So if there's one thing that we should do inside Congress, we should pass the USMCA. Yeah. If we passed USMCA, at a very minimum, there would be 180,000 more Americans working. GDP would go up by more than a point. But you know what would be even more important? Is that we would be stronger going into negotiations with China. Yeah. If you watched last month, our new #1 trader is Mexico. #2 is Canada, surpassing China. This is something that's making America stronger. What I believe, it's only one person holding the power of whether that comes up. It's the Speaker of the House. They are more concerned about tearing this president down instead of building America up. I hope that's debated tonight inside the Democrats as well. Thank you.